So listen, I wanna get started. I'm sure folks will continue to kind of climb in. So I appreciate everybody for joining today's meeting. What we had on the agenda for today is one talking about listening sessions, and then we've had a bunch of them, and then talk about next steps from here. So I want to start by saying, we've done three listening sessions, and we have a fourth one that's all virtual on December 4th. Um, in terms of the three listening sessions, we had a robust discussion at the Elias Brookings Apartments. I think there we had over 20 folks, I would say close to 25 folks in attendance. Really good discussion around digital equity. We also got a lot of good feedback in terms of the way the messaging was being delivered. So I appreciate Eric and team in terms of making sure that we kind of customize, what we're reporting so that folks can it can sink in for folks. We did one at second one was at Indian Orchard. We did not get as much of attendance on that one as possible. I think we had probably like 10 folks in attendance on that one. But we did have some young folks in the room, which, we definitely got some feedback from some students in the Springfield public schools, some leaders within the Indian Orchard community. So that was definitely very important, and some robust discussion from other folks in there. And then the last one we had was at Brightwood, which was actually last week. Same kind of participation rate as the Indian Orchard listening session. So with that, I really want to focus our efforts moving forward on this December 4th virtual. And so I want to make sure that we talk about that, and making sure that we continue to market it out there to folks in the city, whether it be social media, whether it be radio, whether it be press releases. Um, so I want to talk about that. So I'll pause there if folks have anything else to add regarding the other sessions that we attended. So I'll open up the floor for folks. And if nobody has any comments on that, we'll continue moving forward. So yeah, December 4th, 5:30 to 7. We have a virtual one. That one, I've been in communication with folks from the school department. I'm trying to tap into different other groups that we think we still need to kind of get some feedback from. And so I actually was on a meeting this week with students from the Springfield Public Schools, leaders within one of their groups there, and got some really good feedback that I want to share with the PVPC team. But I want to make sure that we also have folks knowing about the December 4th webinar, and kind of pushing folks to that. Jean, I see your hand raised.
I think she's clapping.
I was just
clapping. Oh, she's clapping.
It's exciting that you were able to get some input from young people. That's great.
Yeah, no,
elsewhere.
I had reached out to Springfield Public Schools, and they actually put me on the agenda with one of the groups that they have. It's like a student-led group. So I got to talk to them about digital equity, gather their feedback. They gave some really interesting feedback and perspective, particularly around one, they use, right? Some of them still use school laptops. They talked about some of the stuff that they were, hotspots, but some of the challenges, even just being at home, right, and not being able to connect, and consistency was an issue. So I invited them to join us on December 4th, but I want to continue to push more folks to be able to be there so they can give their feedback on that. Any other questions? Oh, I see Roberta's hand.
Yes, with respect to the upcoming one via Zoom, I suggest reaching out to, I don't know the precise name, but the Department of the Aging, or AGED, within the city administration, because a lot of the people who they work with are homebound.
Yep.
Also within the school system, there is, I'm not positive, but I would suspect there's a department that works specifically with special needs students. many of whom again are either homebound or in the hospital or whatever. So I think those two agencies, if not their clients, should be represented on the call.
No, I appreciate that flag, particularly the one Elder Affairs. I actually had a conversation with the director of Elder Affairs recently, mentioning this, and this is later on the agenda of items I wanted to talk to you guys about. But I'm actually having a meeting with folks from city departments, and in that I have asked for the Elder Affairs director to be included on that, and so he's agreed to be able to come up to that meeting. But that I'll talk a little bit more about that further along, but that's definitely, the different constituencies that we want to make sure are able to be heard, represented, hopefully on this virtual one. So, and I'm taking notes as I as folks chime in, so I appreciate that. The other thing I want to make sure is, like I said earlier, is just continue to get the word out. We've done press releases, we've done social media hits, I actually personally went door to door and dropped off, flyers at people's doors. I think we saw the impact of that at the Indian Orchard. Excuse me, not the Indian Orchard, the Brookings one. It was the Brookings one. So, but I really want to make sure that folks on here that are able to help that in that effort can help us with the outreach, right? Because all of us putting the weight together can get it out there further. And if there's stuff that we're missing, just let us know. We also actually were able to work with a group called Union Capital, which is a really great organization that are doing really great work in the city of Springfield. And I would highly recommend folks at PVPC really build a relationship with them if you haven't already. They've been able to support us as well. So I'm, truly appreciative of them because they're bringing out folks that that usually might not know about these events, and they're also incentivized to join these meetings through the Union Capital program. So we've been very blessed and thankful for their efforts to help us out. So on that end,
Tito actually helped me on another project as well, which is great. He's an enthusiastic guy.
No, Tito's been awesome, and I love everything that they're doing about the program. Informing residents, engaging residents. I mean, they're doing a lot of networking. So, I'm going to try to make it to one of their networking sessions as well, just to continue to push the conversation around this. So, I guess for the PVPC folks, like, is there anything in advance of that December 4th that we need to iron out? Right, that's in a few weeks, but I want to make sure that you guys own the Zoom link, I would imagine, for that, correct?
Yep.
So if you could resend that Zoom link to the entire working group so folks can kind of pass out. I know we had flyers set up and we were able to put a URL code or something like that so folks can click on it.
Yep.
I'd love for everybody to be able to have that again. I know we sent out the flyers before, but if you could send out an email, to all of us with all that information, that'd be great.
Yep.
Eric, remember last round when we did an online one, we discussed being able to have a channel or some way for people to sort of get Spanish translation happening, which is a little bit more challenging online because you don't want to be talking over each other. So just figuring that out logistically would be good.
Okay.
If you contact Zoom, they can tell you how to do it. It's something that they've had set up for over a year now.
Look at that.
Also, since this is Zoom, do we need an ASL interpreter? Or a good transcription, because Zoom's own transcription is, I'll be polite, it's poor. So if not an ASL interpreter, at least a better transcription service than what's built into Zoom.
Yep. Is there anybody the city typically uses?
It's a great question that I'm not aware of. I don't know if Sequoia or Gene, if you have any knowledge on that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. myself neither, unfortunately.
I mean, we've done great with Gabriella live. I
Mhm.
don't know how comfortable she is in the online format.
Well, I think,
And
go ahead, Gene, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I'm not sure if you were asking who does the city use for ASL interpretation or for interpretation to to Spanish. And I'm sorry, I missed that
I think she
exact
was
question.
mentioning ASL.
ASL?
I had specifically said ASL.
Okay.
The Spanish sign language is different from ASL.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, I mean,
But I
anytime
was
that I have,
saying,
oh, I'm sorry.
sorry,
Roberta.
I was saying ASL or a good transcription service, not the one that's built into Zoom.
Mhm. So what I know about ASL is whenever I book them is I go through the Mass Commission for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And there are people there that you can contract with.
Okay.
Sometimes a participant might say such and such an interpreter is the person I like to work with.
Okay.
So it looks like for this Spanish translation, Zoom might be an option, based off of Roberta's, suggestion. So thank you for that. And then,
I'm sorry,
Great.
Zoom would advise on how the channel is set up, not providing
okay,
the translator. Okay,
Okay.
there's a dedicated channel.
okay.
What does city council do when there's a big meeting that they want to make sure they have full interpretational services at?
That's a great question. I haven't seen any interpretation happening. I mean, we
Okay.
had recently an issue where we had a person who could not, whose English wasn't, as strong, and so we ended up, a few of us counselors ended up translating for that person.
Yep.
But we did ask the city council president to look into, something for the future, because I don't think it's fair for city councilors to be translating and putting ourselves on the hook
Right.
for something like that that the city could be providing. So from a translation perspective, I'm not aware of anything, and I
Yep.
don't think anything has been resolved on that yet.
I can reach out to Wayfinders and see what they do in their meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, if you could do that,
Yeah.
if you guys could take care of those pieces, I think we have enough time between now and December 4th to figure it out. But
I'll reach out tomorrow.
I think that's part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation, just to make sure that,
Yep.
anything that we're thinking of, and Roberta comes up with really great ideas and stuff that we might not be thinking. So I appreciate that. So we talked a little bit about marketing. Um, so yeah, if you can send out kind of the Zoom link, all that information, so we can start blasting that.
Yep.
We've been blasting the flyers, with the media and all that, but I want to make sure that folks actually have the link that they can click on,
Yep.
that's accessible, and then the pieces around translation services. Any other comments or questions in regards to the December 4th?
One just quick suggestion, Doug, if you maybe want to redo the flyer with the QR code with the Zoom link, that might be helpful.
That would be super helpful. I know we had another QR code on there on the flyer. That was the Union Capital QR code.
Right.
So I don't know if having two of them might be confusing, but I'd rather have, people have access to the link. And the Union Capital one was a really small code. So, but I think you need multiple ways to I think the QR code, I think an actual a link or something that folks can click on when it's through email as well.
Yeah.
Got to find multiple ways to make sure that folks know about it. All right. Anything else on December 4th? I did want to also flag that I did see from some of the emails that MBI is also hosting a webinar on December 4th during the day at like 11. So I know Sequoia said he signed up for it, and I know some other folks have brought it up. So appreciate Sequoia for being able to join that one that morning.
Yeah, no problem. And if there's any new developments or anything new, I'll make sure I let everyone know.
And we'll be there as well, of course.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. All right. The second thing I wanted to talk about is I know we just came off the recent presidential election. Um, whether your person won or lost, there's a lot of folks that are, trying to figure out the next steps. I know that there have been some concerns brought up to me in regards to, you know, what's going to happen with a lot of these federal grants. And what I can say is, I don't know what's going to happen. I can only hope that a lot of these things that are out there, that are really going to make true impacts for folks, are things that the next administration considers keeping. But even in my full-time job, there's some concern and worry for other folks that I work with through my full-time job on other areas that are not related to digital equity with the same concerns, right? And so we just have to continue to work together and make sure that we keep our eyes on the prize for the time that we have, and go from there. And I think I wanted to mention that because I know that there's some, again, anxiety and worries about that and what happens to these potential funds, but I can't predict on what's going to happen. All I can say is we continue to just move forward towards that collective goal of um, getting this done for the city, getting the recommendations, and using our folks to apply for this stuff. With that being said, I do want to mention that I have scheduled some meetings with the city folks. I mentioned this earlier. Some city departments. So Coy, thank you for your help and support on that. So Coy has been having some conversations, and so we want to continue to update the city departments, but also have actual meaningful conversations on next steps in terms of what are we trying to do and accomplish within this time frame. And so there's a meeting that's going to be happening, I want to say on the 25th. I've got to confirm that time that's going to happen. So I wanted to address that here, but as we back up from that, I want to start having conversations here. One of the things I want to address is, I know Roberta's brought it up to me, and I think Gene, you've also brought it up to me, is next steps. We've brought up the contract that PVPC has with us, and so I wanted to make sure that PVPC takes a moment. They shared the contract earlier today, but I think it's worth Eric, you going over kind of what are the expectations from the contract. I'd also like to know, like, what are the expected deliverables and timeline,
Yep.
so that we can kind of move forward. Because I think where we're at now is we're doing these listening sessions, but we also want to make sure that we're in line to be furthering our work on
Yep.
whether it's the grants that we already have or potential other grants that we
Yep.
can go after. And so I want to start with the contract, because I know that was something that was asked of me. So I want to make sure that you can clear that up for us. So if we can go there.
You want to go there now?
Yes.
Do you want me to pull up a copy of what I sent or just speak to it?
I think whichever is easier. I think if
I'll
you can
speak
pull
to
up,
it for now. Everybody got it. And if we want, I can pull it up if we need it. I have it available.
Sure.
So, this process, you know what? No, I'll just speak to it for now.
I
So,
think
I'm
it may
sorry,
be
I do not
easier.
recall seeing the contract, so if you could pull that up, please.
all right,
Yeah,
let
I
me
was
see
going to
what I
mention,
can.
I think it may be easier to pull up that while you're
All
talking.
right. Give me one sec. Hopefully it's going to come up. Can everybody see what I got in front of me here?
Yes.
That make it easier for everybody to read?
I'm sorry,
Nice and big, right?
that's the contract?
This is the statement of work right out of the contract, the language exactly in there.
Okay, okay.
So, it says, there are multiple parts to how this started. We started back in October, as everybody knows. October 23. Let me just see if I can pull up that. So here is the project timeline and activities that we have laid out. This is up to date. The original grant was for 102,000 and some 25, and that occurred in October of 23. We got right to work in October, and November through February, we did an evaluation of existing conditions, and we did a whole number of community engagement meetings, as the people here know. We then submitted on time, and that's a mistake and that's a typo on the date. I apologize for that. That is 23, not 18. We then submitted that to the city on time in accordance with the contract. Then there was a bit of a gap in terms of work that went on because of some shifts with the city and some other things. And we got back on track later in the spring, early summer, in June, in terms of trying to move ahead on the grant. A couple of things happened then. We were able to coordinate and get the implementation funds in place. So that was done. I backed up Sequoia on that. And that put in place close to $57,000 of implementation money. But I have some good news there, that the MBI people put aside 57, but they're wanting an application from the city that's worth the full 100,000 that you deserve. So what we want to do is put together a application for the city as a result of this that asks for the full 100,000 in implementation monies. And we had that conversation with MBI
Eric,
today.
if I can just chime in really quickly.
Yep.
On the new city council structure, I'm assuming that means new city council coming in, and me being appointed.
Yep.
I would say my appointment was at some point in February, and I know
Okay.
our first meeting was, I think towards the end of May on
Okay.
there. So,
Okay. Okay. No problem. So that is the timeline that we are on. The bottom line here is the conversation we had with MBI was all about the fact that we should be done by the end of December with everything that we want to get done and submitted to them to put the city on a good, strong timeline for the spring. And that officially the grant ends at the end of June 25, but hitting December with the final report and everything wrapped up would be really nice. So that was where we were on a timeline, and then this is the scope of work that goes with it. There were many pieces to it. The first part was data gathering and trying to understand what was going on in Springfield. We went over a lot of the maps of the what was being distributed throughout the city by Comcast. We looked through a number of data surveys, of which are all listed here in terms of target populations and current gaps in broadband accessibility. So we packed that stuff up pretty good and did the research into where the strong spots in the city were and where the weak spots in the city were. We then began the outreach and engagement portion, which was right out of the contract again, in which we were going to do a series of meetings and/or charrettes, which we accomplished at that time period between October and December. We then pulled together a draft report, which went to the city and to the mayor. I don't know if it made it to the mayor, but it went to the city in December of 23. And then we moved on from there. So it's really interesting. The deliverables are first the existing conditions, then we've done that. That's been delivered in the draft report. And then the asset inventory, which talks about what's in place, and we have that piece pretty well in hand. And then the one piece that has not been done to complete and close out the grant is this final plan, which requires a lot of communication, a lot of feedback with the city, with the people that are here today, to be able to put this all together in one package. The draft is strong. MBI likes what we've done, but we need to make sure we finalize it. And the recommendations have to be what the city wants, not what PVPC wants. We have a whole series of things that we can look at, but it has to be what the city wants and the people who have input into that. So then there's some language about deadlines and things like that. This is some just pieces of what we need to do to make sure we keep in touch with MBI. And there was some stuff on the budgets and invoices, which was not necessary, but I put it in there. This is the agreement that is in place now for the implementation grant, which is all Springfield's money. None of that money comes to PVPC. That money all goes to Springfield for the implementation part. And so that's what this piece is all about. When the final report is reviewed and accepted by MBI, this kicks into place and was put in place between the city and MBI to help pay for whatever gets recommended. So I want to be really clear that this money does not come to the PVPC. This money comes to the city and it gets put towards the programs that it was intended for through the city. So in terms of the general review of what's expected, that's a good chunk of it right there. That's the contract language. That's the contract with regards to implementation. That's an important part of everything we've been talking about. So I don't have a lot more detail. I mean, I can answer any question you want, but the amount of money that was held by the state, that's being held by the state, is just shy of 57,000. But they have made it, I can't say how clear, they've made it extremely clear that the city can apply for the 100,000 with a good, strong proposal, and they really want to help the city get something done there. So, and we heard that again from them today.
Eric, thank you for breaking that down. I have a few questions myself.
Sure.
So you mentioned this $57,000
Yep.
that we have or we spent.
No, this is money that is being held at MBI for the city. It has not been spent. And it really could be 100, you could call it 100,000 because the proposal that the state is looking for, or MBI is looking for, is for 100,000. They place held 57, but they acknowledged on the phone today that they would like to see $100,000 proposal from the city.
So that 57 to $100,000,
Yep.
is that different from the implementation grant, or are those
No,
the same
that is the
thing?
implementation grant.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to make sure I was clear on, because that's what I
Yep.
thought it was. But I
Yep.
heard, so the implementation grant is up to 100. I
Yep.
thought I heard 102,000 before, but
Yep, the
Go ahead.
102,000 is the initial money put down for the PVPC to work on this as a consultant for the city. That's money between PVPC and MBI.
and MBI. So
Yeah.
that's separate from the implementation grant. that
Correct.
The city will
Now,
then
that's the
use.
only money we get to touch. Everything else belongs to the city.
Got it.
Eric, can I jump in with two clarifying points?
Yep.
I'm gonna ask folks real, if it, just because there's gonna be a lot of voices, if folks can just put their hands up, so that way
Oh.
there's not too many folks competing in. So Mike, I'll give it to you, but I just want to make sure
Cool.
folks can just raise their hands going forward.
Can do. Sorry about that, Jose.
No worries.
Just two things with the implementation grant. I think there's two triggers which are worth noting. One is, in order to start the process, the city has to submit the final report for the
Yep.
digital equity plan. So until that happens, the city can't get implementation funds. And then the second part is that there's a proposal for what the city wants to do with the implementation funds that MBI has to receive.
Right.
So that's where the prioritization comes in. Those two things need to occur, and then the money will flow.
Right. And we're with you all the way to get that done. There's no challenge. There's no problem with us continuing to push to help make all that happen.
Okay, so I heard there's the final report city submits for the implementation grant, and then Michael, you said the second piece is the plan.
Well, the first piece is the plan, which
Yep.
PVPC will submit on the city's behalf once you guys approve it.
Yeah.
And then the second one is essentially the proposal to say, this is what the city is proposing to do with X amount of funds for implementation.
This is how we will try to spend it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
All right.
essentially the grant application, right, for the implementation phase.
Say it again.
So sorry to jump in too. So that proposal is
But
essentially
you're messing up my flow here, man. No, I'm
sorry, Jose. I couldn't go back. So that proposal is essentially the application, right, for the implementation phase? Or
It's
grant funding?
It's the application for spending that money. The application for the money is already done. That 57 to 100,000 is in place. It's the
Yeah.
description of what you're going to do with the money that you need to bring back to MBI and say, this is how we're going to spend it.
Right, and that's above and beyond what we outlined in the digital equity plan.
Oh,
correct?
yeah, absolutely.
All right,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Got it. So I saw Roberta's hand first, so I apologize, Roberta. You were before a lot of folks, so I'm gonna kick it to Roberta.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The 57,000 that's already being held, is
Yep.
that open for anything that we want to spend it on that they then approve? Or were they already told that 57,000 is for a specific purpose?
No, it's open to anything that gets chosen by the city to prioritize its spend.
Okay. The second question I have, and then I'll get to the third or fourth. Could you please, when you're speaking, could you distinguish between the city and this working group? Because I understand that your contract is not with the city council, so therefore it's not with the working group. But if we keep saying the city, it gets kind of confusing about who you've presented stuff to and who you're looking for a response from. So that's a request that I have.
Okay,
Third thing is, I see you refer to data you've collected that goes back to 2021. I have said this several times at several different places, that it is my belief that that data is totally outdated. It was collected during the height of COVID, when people had subsidies for internet subscriptions, children had tablets and other devices that they were sent home with. Those programs don't exist anymore. So it does not, I would strongly suggest that unless someone here took part in the challenge grant program a couple of months ago, that there's a need to get updated data.
we will
And
certainly, I'm sorry, go ahead.
and I'm saying that based on the fact that I've been teaching online for the last 20 years, and the feedback that I get from students as well as people in the community, that that data is outdated. And some of it wasn't valid in the first place because Comcast lies, and we know this. There was a challenge grant opportunity, which I understand from PVPC could not be applied for by the municipality. However, I wonder if any other organization in Springfield took part in that and what the results were that were found in that challenge. And then finally, if I can remember what the fourth one was now. I'll get back to the fourth because I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Thanks, Roberta. I'm
in-
gonna go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, in response, we will see what data we can update and what data is available. I'm not 100% sure either way in this moment, but I'll have Doug look into it. So if we can update things, we will, Roberta.
If you can, Eric, because I think she brings up a really valid point,
Yes.
right? In terms of, I mean, just this year alone, the ACP program, right? That program is no longer in existence.
Exactly.
So that's different data. So I don't know where you get the data from or how you get it, but I think,
Yeah.
Trying to get as accurate as we can obviously is important.
Yep.
Obviously, we also have this timeline that we're trying to work within. So whatever
Yep.
we can do to add that. So I'd
No,
appreciate
Doug
it.
and I'll make that a priority over the next couple of weeks to see if we can dig up other data that is more current.
Correct.
I remember my fourth question, if you don't mind, Jose.
Go ahead, Ms. Roberta.
The fourth is that MBI/BEAD/the state of Massachusetts. I don't know what hat they were wearing. They basically said near the beginning of their process that there were 3 steps or 3 plans that they were encouraging people to develop.
Yep.
One was a plan that says, okay, this is the situation in my locality. These are conditions with respect to internet infrastructure, digital literacy, blah, blah, blah. And here is what the target populations have said are their problems and their proposed solutions. The second plan was one that would have a short list of proposed solutions. And the third one was, this is like our number one made of gold solution that we would like funding for, and this is how much we need. What is it of those 3 that PVPC is actually producing under your current contract?
If I understand your question, we have produced a pretty comprehensive list of options that the city can look at that are part of what we may get to tonight, or this afternoon, that lists short-term and long-term options and some of the costs associated with them. But the final decision is not ours as PVPC. It's whatever version you want to call it, the city, the council, the working group, whichever group that is. It's not our call. We're only here to make suggestions, and it's your decision as to which ones are the most important ones for the city of Springfield.
Okay, will you include the background information so that we're making informed decisions? Or
We
do
have
we
a
still
pretty
have
good
to go
amount of
out
it.
and say, you know, is this option better than that one? Because we have information to work with.
Yeah, the answer is in the documents we've given out over the last day or so, there's a lot of information. And I'm happy to come back and talk a little more, to make sure that we're all reading it the same way and understand what's being offered there.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Roberta. Stephen had his hand up next, but Michael, I see you itching to jump in. I just want to make sure, is it something new or are you just trying to add to what Eric was saying? Because I don't want to cut into Stephen's piece.
I was actually just going to respond to clarify about Roberta's point.
Okay.
So with the municipal digital equity planning, what MBI had, it was very clear what had to be in a plan. And so it's one document that PVPC is producing in response to the criteria that MBI had. So it is the background, it is the recommendations. It's also looking forward in terms of understanding the landscape. So all the things, Roberta, that you identified are required in an MBI final report that PVPC will produce.
Thank you,
All due
Michael.
respect, on the MBI website, they have one if you're just having Tourette's. It has one
Yep.
if you're having Tourette's plus whatever.
Yep.
They've outlined several different plans. That's why I was asking which of these is, if it's a combination, that's fine. I just wanted clarification on which of these you were contracted to do.
We were contracted to do the one with meetings and or charrettes, whatever you want to define them as. But not, and a full comprehensive study, not just a charrette.
Okay, but not a proposal for an actual solution
No, well,
with the budget and everything else that one would have in that.
not a true detailed feasibility, like a technical feasibility study, but what we will have and what we do have is estimates of what different things could cost and could be looked at. So when you use the implementation money, you can identify which part of the implementation money goes to which project.
And that's in the 17-page document you sent out?
That is in, yeah, there's the information is in there, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. I want to make sure I give it the opportunity to Mr. Howard. Yes, he's had his hand raised for a little bit. Stephen, are you still there?
Stephen, we're not hearing you.
No, we don't hear you, Stephen. Maybe you can put it in the chat if you have ability to put it in the chat.
I think Steve is now on because it does not say he's muted.
Stephen, why don't you log back on? Try again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's gonna speak through my microphone.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Okay, I have a few questions, but I'm just going to ask two, and I'll come back after everyone else has had a chance. Eric, you said that you submitted the original report in December to the mayor's office.
We submitted it to the working group in the city council.
Okay, was it, to your knowledge, was it ever submitted to the mayor or to the mayor's office?
I was not responsible for getting it to the mayor's office. I can't answer that question.
Okay, because that I was under the impression that it was your responsibility to do so. So I was wrong in that. Has any follow-up been made Mr. Chair, do you know if any follow-up was made to determine if the mayor's office or the mayor did actually see that report?
So what I can say is I don't know what happened in between the time frame of December, January, February. What I can say is I do have a meeting with the mayor coming up even before our other meeting to discuss this project on top of a number of other initiatives that I'm working on. So I will make sure I follow up with the mayor's office tomorrow to ensure they had it. But from my understanding, the draft report went out. I just don't know what's been read or done on their end. So
Okay, because in the December recording of the meeting, I got the impression that Eric was supposed to be submitting it to the mayor. So maybe that's my misunderstanding, and I apologize.
If I could just clarify, for the
Hey, well-
December working group meeting, Eric was asked to give a status report to the working group.
Yep,
And this is why I'm saying, we need to be clear when we say the city as
Yep.
opposed to the city council or someone else. Michael Fenton was the chair at that time. I do
Yep.
not know if he shared it
right,
with the mayor, but in fairness to PVPC, they were responding to a request from the working group
yep.
when they produced that document.
Okay, well, that clarifies that. So now, so Mr. Chair, you said you will be meeting with the mayor soon to follow up
yes,
on that.
yes, I
Okay.
am.
As far as, okay, I'll let someone else talk because I'm not at my computer and I have my notes at the computer. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll clarify. There have been a number of conversations around digital equity. With the administration. I mean, one of the things that I was able to do once I was able to get folks to recommit to the committee was we actually Sequoia was one of the folks that we were able to get joined because I've made a specific request to the administration that we needed somebody internal within the city to be helping us alongside with PVPC with this process. And so that's one of the, so very, excited and happy that we got Sequoia and he's one of the ones that I've been sharing information with and he's been working with PVPC. In terms of the report, I don't know what the status of whether he's seen it or whether he met with now President Fenton. So, but I will make sure that's one of the things I bring up when I meet with him soon.
Really quick, has the report changed in any way since last December? I just want to make sure that we're getting the most recent copy to the mayor.
That's an excellent question, Sequoia. Doug has been polishing up some of the edges and cleaning up some of it. So if you want the newest version, we can get that to you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Perfect. Mr. Knight, Charlie Knight has had his hand up. Charlie.
As far as I understand it, Dominic has signed on in support of both working group and this one. And she's just awaiting what we come up with in order to be able to support that.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason we've got the meeting set up is we really want to move forward. The meeting that we have with the city is we have a number of folks from different departments. So we've got the CAFO's office obviously is going to be represented. We've reached out to economic development because I think anything we do in terms of some of the work here, I think we need to have that lens on it. As I mentioned earlier, Elder Affairs, our IT folks, Mr. Andy Doty. So there are a number of folks that are going to be part of this. And so one of the things that I really want to focus on for us is the next steps, right? So Eric, you've outlined the contract, you've outlined kind of expected deliverables and timeline. My big hope is that we have some time to talk about next steps and what does that look like in terms of this finalized draft. Because at the end of the day, I'd love to see us through PVPC, or folks can tell me otherwise, look at what are the suggestions. You listed many suggestions on that report that you've been doing at the listening sessions. And I think we need to do ourselves a favor and start really identifying what are the top 3 things, 3 to 5 things that we think we, based off of the knowledge we have now, and you're going to continue to update that data, what do we think we should be looking at in terms of talking to the city about? At the end of the day, it's going to be up to the city what the city can do. But I think that's kind of what I want to spend the remaining time is looking at those next steps and how do we achieve that? What is it that we're looking, in terms of recommendations?
I agree.
And so that's the thing I'm going to put on you, Eric, and the PVPC team is to really guide us in that direction in advance of those meetings we have with the city.
Okay.
I do want to ask a clarifying. So the final report that
Yep.
PVPC submits to the city is a report. We still then have to have a proposal to Roberta's point on what we're going to actually do and what is outlined. So those are things that we're going to need guidance in terms of those conversations.
Yep. And we'll help you with the proposal. That's not a problem. That's part of our responsibility.
Okay.
But it
The
says
other
what the
piece-
city, it says what you want, not what we want.
The other piece that I'm very, aware of is that there are some of those suggested items, right? Like one of them, I'm just going to throw one out. It's like the education piece, right? Education, particularly for folks who are digitally illiterate, right? The digital literacy, right? That's a big piece. But I also understand that there are a number of organizations that are already going after grants and fundings and things that they're doing in that wheelhouse. And so one of the things I want to be mindful of as a city is, do we do things to support those organizations, or do we start looking at other suggestions that will complement that, right? So what I'm trying to say is, does it behoove us to go after certain items that are already being worked on when we could be focusing our energies? And that's a question I don't know. That's a question for the committee. I'm not the foremost expert on all the things that are going on in the city. And so, really, I know some of you guys are part of different groups and so, and you have an understanding of what's already happening within or other organizations or even other communities. So hopefully I wasn't too long-winded there and throwing you guys off, but
no, that's
I
exactly
guess what I'm trying to get to is getting that 3 to 5 suggestions, but being clear on what's already happening.
Yep. So let me see what I can do here in terms of, is this the right one?
Thank you, Doug, for that. I didn't even see that she was in the waiting, so I have to apologize because I totally forgot that at a certain point the city council staff was going to be gone. So that was on us. Beatrice, are you on?
I'm going to reply with finally.
So I have to apologize because Doug just gave me the heads up. It was the smallest little thing on my screen. I didn't see it, and I totally forgot that the city council staff, after a certain time, was not going to be there to help admit people. So I apologize on that.
She will remember.
All right. Hi B, how are you? All right, so let me see. We don't need to go through this because we just went through it all these pieces. So let me just give a status of the grants so that there's some information there, because I know that's come up as a question and I can answer some of the questions that came up today on that. The original equity grant was 102.25. That was the number that MBI came up with, not us. Started in October 2023 and ends June 30th, 2025. And we went over that with MBI today and they're comfortable with all of that. The second thing is, in this process, we also received a $20,000 grant from Comcast to support a digital navigator position. That money is still available. It has not been used, and we're going to make that available to the city to be used on this, because that was the original intent. And there were some ups and downs in terms of who were digital navigators and who was hiring them and who wasn't. And we tried, but we couldn't quite make it work. But the money is still there. Then the next piece is the implementation grant that we've been talking about. The actual dollar amount being held by MBI is 56,604. But as I said, and we've said a number of times, they really want to see $100,000 proposal from the city to use $100,000 of implementation money, not 56,000. And we will work with the city to come up with that. The other things to understand is what's going on is that there was, Stephen pointed out that there was money that was applied for from the NTIA. And what happened in Massachusetts is because we have MBI did the application on behalf of the municipalities and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we're going to be applying for money through MBI for that, not to NTIA. So that money is just being set up by MBI, and they're just setting up the program. Again, we talked to MBI today to get clarification on this. So there will be additional funds there. How much that is set aside, in terms of which grant program and what it's going to support, they have not defined yet, but we will keep close track of that and make sure the city sees whatever it's supposed to see out of that. The last piece in terms of other potential grants is the fact that the BEAD grant did not really do what they wanted it to do. And therefore, there's going to be a significant amount of leftover funds from the BEAD grant. And that is the one that tried to help count how many people were actually missing from the system. And it just didn't work. It was badly planned. It was badly enacted. Not our fault. We weren't involved with it. But that does mean there's going to be money in that is left over from the BEAD. They're still trying to resolve how much there is, and they're going to create a grant program on that as well, that we will make sure that Springfield is in alignment for. So those are two potential places there could be additional grant monies, or will be additional grant monies. They're just not open today for applying for those grants. They will be, but they're not open today. So then we created this section in here in which we wanted to go down and create a list that could be under review by everybody involved of what could be considered on the plan that goes to the state in terms of goes to MBI as to how you can spend the money. Some of these are things that cost money, and some of these are things that don't cost money. The first one we listed was work to replace the Affordable Connectivity Program. That's a big ask. We know that's not really going to happen, but it needs to be stated out front that if there's ever a way to get money back into a program, the ACP program is one that we would love to see the money go back into. I know B can vouch for this. It's been terrible what they did. They set up a great program and then chopped the legs out from underneath it in a way that was damaging to a lot of people. One thing that might be of great benefit to Springfield is expanding the hotspot program. There could be other areas in which you want to create funds to help people who can't pay their bills. There could be ways to, we talked about the MBI funds. We could talk about creating a number of public network access points. One thing that I think that MBI would love to see is a plan for developing a mesh network in some of the underserved areas, at least one of them in the city. And I think they're interested in seeing that happen. And I think that would be what helped makes it $100,000 proposal. A big one is the idea of engaging landlords in the process. They say, oh, we've got a wire coming to the building, but that doesn't mean everybody in the building has access. That just means there's a wire coming to the building. And then the one that is a real challenge and is really starting from years and years ago is continuing to subsidize the fiber network, which is that never is cheap because you're talking about equipment and installation. And these are in no particular order. We did not try to rank them in any kind of priority order. Providing devices to those in need, that you could do something like $300 per device, provide 50 devices or something like that, use some of the money for that. Oh yeah, and the hotspots would be about $120 a piece. And the suggestion was made to do, 25 different hotspots or 50 different hotspots. Again, we can work all those details out later. The idea of creating some sort of digital navigator position or somebody who can help continue the work that's going on here past June in terms of what we're trying to do would be of great value. Whatever you want to call that position, somebody to help keep pushing this forward for the city would be of great value. This idea, and I know it came up in conversation earlier about creating or funding places or coordinating with people for digital skills training, whether that's some of what Tech does, Tech Foundry does, or others. There is a significant need. Our goal is not to recommend that you start everything brand new. But if there are programs that you can tap into that you can support that can help, let's do that. I think it's more important to strengthen the programs that are in place than reinvent the wheel on this. Obviously, a place that everybody looks is to encourage the schools to provide. It's one thing to have a device. It's another thing to know how to use it or have the broadband available to use it. And then the other questions came up earlier, in terms of working with Council on Aging and Library and possibly the Housing Authority to make things like this happen. This list continues for one more page, but these are all the things that came up in all the conversations we've had. Some level of cross-agency digital skills training so that your one agency doesn't run a whole lot better than another agency, that there's smoothness in terms of how the agencies operate throughout the city. The idea of creating a digital equity service that people can get access to. How do you do that, and how do people do that? We strongly support that this working group stay in place. I think that it's good to have a watchdog type group. It's good to have a group of people who are very focused on what they're trying to do, paying attention. It's obviously a big issue that requires a number of people to help keep track of it. We need to make sure that the things that we're talking about for implementing, or you're talking about for implementing, can be backed up with some community engagement, so we know how they're supporting the community at large. The next couple are a little bit more complicated in terms of sharing data with citizens and encouraging accountability. That's a transparency piece, but the more that you have things working, the easier it is to provide transparency. It's easy to kind of hide papers now or whatever, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but the more that everything is out and on the net, the more transparency there will be. And this one is one that I've seen in other places and they really like it, is to make sure that in all their grant proposals, and you're talking about doing things, make sure they support this idea of digital equity. Don't try to create a program separate from it, but find something that synergizes with it, that can work with it. And then the other thing is that, and I've made this recommendation to a number of communities, as much as you can, keep digital issues in your budget. Make sure there's a place in the budget to deal with new technology, because whatever we're talking about today, we know in 5 years it's going to be different. So those are the pieces that were the opportunities to be considered, as it were. Then we began on the set of recommendations. So I'm not trying to bore you or make this long-winded, but the idea of advocating to secure MBI funds is something we talked about. The idea of creating a digital equity coordinator or a digital navigator is one that we think is a high priority for the city. The idea of training and working with an organization like Tech Foundry is important. Working with the departments to make sure that there's trainings that go on is really important. So it's hard to say which one of these is the highest one, but the digital support services through the various groups in the city, the more coordinated that is, the better off you're going to be in the long run. This is the piece on the working equity working group, to make sure you stay in the loop on everything that goes on. And I know Councilor Delgado wants to make sure that this stays live and stays the way it's supposed to be. The other one is that there's obviously a need to put the landlords in the place where they can actually follow up. And part of that is putting them in the place, and part of that is putting Comcast on notice as well, that these things can be done. And then the one that's last on the page here is kind of a citywide effort to make sure digital equity services are integrated into everything. And that could come from the mayor in terms of a priority and a proposal to make happen. So
Eric, I'm gonna
yep, I'm gonna stop right there for a minute.
Yeah, I'm gonna pause you there because that was a lot of information
It was.
to digest. And I know in terms of time, we're not gonna figure that out today.
Yep.
So I would highly recommend that we set up another meeting
Yep.
just devoted to this.
Yep.
In terms of what we're talking about for,
Yep.
when I say, we should be really kind of looking at what are those 3 to 5 things that we could be pushing the
Yep.
city. I think there's still a lot of information that I'd like to get
Mhm.
gathered. One, I mentioned this earlier, is kind of identifying what's already being done
Yep.
from that list from other organizations,
Yep.
right? I think understanding what's already being done and how we can either support that or leverage that, I think
Yep.
is going to be pretty valuable.
Yep.
The other piece I would say, on top of understanding what's going on, is actually understanding the potential cost structures for each of those.
Yep.
Right. I would imagine there are some of those that you've listed that are low hanging fruit,
Yep,
right? Where there's other proposals that are gonna need significant investment. And I think being able to break that out too,
yep,
understanding that is going to be very important, especially when we continue to have talks with the city on next steps. So I think
yep.
those are two things I would really like to see, and I think we should dedicate a whole other meeting just with the working group and other folks to really dissect this. The third piece, and then I'll start calling on other folks, is I think, I'd like to get that shared if you haven't already shared that already, so folks can kind of digest that and sit with it. I think that would be super helpful in
Okay,
preparation for another meeting in
yep,
terms of what we want to see moving forward.
that's
Um,
great. I'm all in.
with that, I will be quiet, and I don't know who was first, but I think I saw Charlie's hand first. So I'm going to throw it to you, Mr. Knight.
Thank you so much. Um, a couple things. I'm on a bunch of committees and stuff like that, and the city has money that comes through some of them that then we provide a notice of funding opportunity and we have people make applications. I'm
Yep,
thinking that digital equity can be added into those things to have the various agencies that apply for the funding make sure that they are helping with digital mentors, with digital navigators, that sort of thing as well. We can increase the amount of work that's done by being a requirement of some of the things that we ask people to do when we give them money through the city. The other thing is with regard to maybe a model for other landlords that maybe our own city housing authority can do in the buildings that it has control over. I'm thinking as you are, not reinventing the wheel, but if we have the authority to do something, let's us do it and show others it can be done. And with
I,
that, I'll shut up.
On that point, Eric, have you reached out at all to the housing authority?
yeah, we're in the same building. I talked to her early in the process.
Okay, I just because I think that's one that I've heard multiple times, and I just want
Yeah,
to make sure that
yeah,
we are tapping into that network.
yeah.
Yeah.
We talked early in the process, so
And Mike might be able to chime in. I believe Denise, the Housing Authority has digital navigators, right, Mike?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just crossing the street, but yeah, the Alliance is funding one digital navigator to do financial literacy counseling, so helping people with their finances and using that as a vehicle for digital skills training. And we have talked to Denise about the express need that the housing authority has is they have community rooms that are not wired.
right.
And so that's something that I think they have 13 locations and a good percentage of those could use community rooms to get wired.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. I think I saw Roberta's hand first,
No,
and
Stephen's hand was up before you.
okay, sorry, Stephen.
Okay, can you hear me now, Mr. Chair?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Have a few questions. Some of the cities here in Massachusetts have been awarded $1.26 million with an average of $70,000. Our name, Springfield, does not apply there. Why not?
I don't know what program you're referring to.
MBI.
No, the way the MBI program works is a city or a town can get up to 100,000. And there is a list, and until the report is approved and the plan is approved, Springfield's name won't be on there, but the moment that's done, your name will be on there.
Okay, now, is this working group limited to going after BEAD's MBI funds, or can they go after the money that's been allocated in the governor's budget?
I'm not sure which money you're talking about there either.
Well, yeah, I have a list. I can send you a list, but
Okay,
it
that would
goes
be,
into some of it is for infrastructure, cybersecurity, education, starting
oh,
from pre-K through college. Two areas that are missing is special ed and continuing education. And it's I'm not too sure, but I believe it's somewhere about, I was trying to pull it up. I don't have it in front of me, but it's a nice chunk of change. So could we tap into
I'm
those
happy to take a look
resources?
at what you've got, that's for sure.
I'll send it to you in a few minutes.
Okay,
Because if there are these millions of dollars that's been allocated, I don't see why we should just be focusing on the BEAD MBI funds. I have some other stuff, but I'll stop for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I think he brings up a good point. I mean, we're working on this implementation grant, but having an understanding if there's other dollars that we could be going after simultaneously, I think
yep,
that behooves us, right?
Yep.
While that stuff is out there. Mike, I know you looking to chime in. I'm assuming to answer that question.
Yeah, there really isn't any other money. I know Stephen said there's governors allocated money, but I'm not aware of any. MBI is the state broadband office, and so the two pots of money, there's the implementation funds we've talked about, and that source is ARPA funds, and then the BEAD money, which in total that came to Massachusetts was 147 million. A part of that has to be used for its primary reason, which is to connect people who were not connected. And then what's left over are funds that MBI can then distribute. And I think the advocacy component of it is, as Eric confirmed earlier, MBI hasn't figured out what the funding programs are. I've been in conversations where they say that they want to fund one program about digital navigation, but that's not going to eat up tens of millions of dollars. So the question is, what else can be created for a funding program? But aside from implementation and to be determined programs with BEAD funds, there is no state money that I'm aware of, and I feel like I'm pretty aware of all the money that's out there at this point. So we're not missing a big program.
Okay, well, I'm talking about the governor's FY24 budget, meaning 24 going into 25.
Mhm.
And it is itemized as to,
Okay.
It doesn't, let me see if I can pull that up and I'll share it in the chat.
But if you want to send it to me first, just so I can understand where it's coming from, that's great, so I can see which sources they're talking about.
All right. So while you're doing that, I want to give Roberta a chance to chime in.
Yeah, a couple of things. MBI gave a grant earlier this year, $37 million to Verizon. The only details I was able to find is that it's for some project they have for a number of localities in Western Mass, including Springfield, but I don't know what it is they're intending to do. So if you could find more information on that. I see Michael seems to be a jack of all trades.
Mike, jump in, man.
Before he responds, unless you want to respond to that and then come back to me, I had two other things I was going to say.
Yeah, it's a quick response. So MBI created what they call the GAP program, and the idea was for in communities where people were still not connected, where they still didn't have internet connection, they funded ISPs to build out the communities. And so there were two rounds, and ISPs were allowed to apply to MBI to get Westfield fully wired if there were some communities in Westfield or wherever it might be. Usually they're rural communities. And so I know Verizon applied and got some towns, Comcast got others, but I think pretty much all of the big ISPs applied for the GAP funding. So that's most likely what that was.
Yes, it was, but Springfield is on the list that Verizon says they want to do something for. So I think we need to find out what it is they want to do.
No, I saw that as well.
Comcast was the Cape and Islands.
Okay.
Right, not Springfield. Verizon got the biggest chunk of that money.
Okay.
Okay. The other things were Steve made reference to the state budget. There's also foundations. I can't remember the name now of the now divorced couple at Microsoft. They tend to have money available under their foundation. There are other foundations that we can reach out to. There are insurance companies that are based right here in our area that have foundations. There are banks. There's requirements that banks invest in the areas that they're located. So, and they give money for a variety of purposes if we go to them with a good grant application. So the fact that they may not I mean, Microsoft is obvious as a place to go and harass. But even these others that don't typically concern themselves with digital equity will consider a grant application. So there's nothing requiring us to limit ourselves to MBI. When I speak of us, I'm talking about the Digital Equity Committee, with whomever we can get, the working group, with whomever we can get to assist us. There's nothing that prevents us from thinking of other sources. And the other thing I wanted to suggest as perhaps an immediate task is either a calendar or a link to a calendar of the funding opportunities that are available from MBI/BEAD for anyone. I noticed in Eric's email that he sent out earlier today, there were a lot of times when it was said, well, a municipality was not eligible to apply, but that doesn't mean we can't tell other people about what the funding opportunities were. There was a funding opportunity just a couple of months ago for people to apply to wire multi-unit dwellings. I don't know if anyone in Springfield applied. We need to get the information out there. There's no reason that we should all be looking for a slice of the $100,000 pie if there are other funds also available from MBI/BEAD that organizations that are not municipal organizations could be applying for. But we need to get the information out there. With all due respect to PVPC, I suddenly heard about things today that they were aware of. I don't know if you've had the opportunity through the last year to share that information with anyone, but we and the working group at least need to be sharing that information with the 150,000 people who reside in Springfield so that they can also apply for funding opportunities.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to highlight 2 points that Roberta, you made. I mean, all your points were spot on. But to your point about the private funds, I think that's, important, especially when we're coming to the city with suggestions, recommendations. I know I asked you to break down potential cost of potential suggestions, but if you do find those type of private things, if we could add that in terms of understanding what's out there, I think to her point, understanding what's out there and what we can kind of be leveraging. And two, I love the idea of a calendar or a link and more information for folks. So that is actually something that I was going to talk with Sequoia and the IT team at the city in terms of having a page that's dedicated to sharing whatever information we have so that folks can come to the city and have a one-stop shop to say, hey, here's what out there. Even if it's not the city itself planning for it, at least there's something that we could be populating for folks to come to and be that source. So I think that's an opportunity that we definitely should be.
Yeah, I think that's very clever.
I don't know if Stephen, if that your hand was still up or if you have more.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Mr. Chair, that I've put in some links in the chat about the different opportunities that are available. The last one I just sent is for $15.4 million for Career Technical Institute. Again, part of the FY24 governor budget. And there are several other things that I've seen, and I'm trying to pull it up, but it comes up to I'm not too sure, but I think it comes up to maybe $250 million or something like that. But I have to go and pull it all up. But there's some nice, it may be about 100 million. But there's some nice money that's available. And for us to just be focused on MBI and be depending on MBI, I think that's counterproductive, especially when there's another part in the governor's budget. If I could just pull it up real quick, it comes under the technology and cybersecurity. It's in one of the links I just sent. It comes under her budget, $9.2 million in additional cybersecurity investments, $2.6 million in software licenses and web security, network endpoint protection, and threat detection. Support continues, consolidated the IT services and so forth and so forth. So, there's money there, but it seems as though people are not aware. I attend meetings. I try to share this with people saying, look, there's money allocated. It's not you got to go and put in a request to get the money. The money is there, but people just don't seem to be, well, this is not where you need to talk about that. Go talk about that. Okay, go talk to this group. Go talk to that group. I mean, people are just, shooing me away like I'm trying to sell them the Brooklyn Bridge or something. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you for your continued sharing of the information. So I know we're at about an hour and 20 minutes. I do want to kind of circle back and just kind of go over. There's been a lot of good discussion today. And Eric, you, Mike, and Doug have a lot of I would say on the list of stuff that you've been asked to do. But I
Yep.
want to just kind of go over some stuff.
Yep.
So we talked about the listening session for December 4th and making sure that we continue to push that virtually amongst our
Yep.
networks. There are a number of things you're going to do there.
Yep.
The suggestions and recommendations that you have and kind of split it, being able to break it up, one in terms of seeing, I think we need another meeting just to talk about
Yep.
what
Yep.
the actual 3 to 5 are going to be with this working
Yep.
group. And so I would love to see what folks' calendars are looking like for Friday the 22nd, if you guys are available, because I think that's going to be super critical in terms of what we're going to be kind of talking to the city about on the 25th. So breaking up, kind of your 3 to 5, what we're thinking we can come out of that, but also looking at it from what are some low hanging fruits and what are some costs associated with the potential stuff. And knowing that that's not going to be gospel in terms of the cost, right? Because everything changes. Also identifying, grant opportunities that are still out there that we may be going after, whether that's public and private. And Stephen has been giving us a lot of information from the public sector, but also that Roberta brought up the private sector as well. I think also understanding what are other organizations already doing. And I say that again because there are a lot of organizations that have gotten funding, particularly around digital literacy. I think Roberta brought up hotspots that some organizations are giving discounts. So I think having that in terms of this package that we work on. I know on my end, I'm going to have some meetings with the mayor and then following up into the meeting that we were going to have with the city departments. So I'm going to work with Sequoia and the PVPC team in advance of that. Part of my conversation is talking about creating some type of website or something where we can kind of calendar something where we can be a one-stop shop for folks. And then finalizing a date for us to get back together on the suggestions. There's a lot there. Is there anything that I missed from a high level?
Well, one thing I'd like to add, Mr. Chair, there's something like $250 million, I think it is, that's been allocated for education, and seeing that, practically everything that's done in schools when it comes to reading and stuff is for is done on the computer, we need to find out how we could reinstate that program where the students are able to take their Chromebooks or laptops home so that they could do their homework. We also need to see how we could get, my recommendation is 10% of the school's population, 10% of those laptops, Chromebooks on standby, because in speaking to some educators, one was frustrated because she says it takes about 3 months to replace one of those units when they're broken. Now, how does that impact on on that student or those students, especially if that's what they use to go to do their homework on? And it's things like this we really need to get to in depth. Thank you.
No, thank you, Stephen. The one other thing I forgot to mention is I put in a link on the award that Roberta was talking about in terms of the Verizon, that broadband $45 million grant. That link was what then I put in there was based on that, and it just highlights Verizon got the money in all the different communities. So I know that's something that folks are going to look into. Beatrice, I apologize on that because I thought that went out already a week ago. This meeting was set up before. I had the council office set it up. So if that, I wasn't aware that there were some folks that weren't on the email distribution list when it went out. So that's why I sent the link out. Roberta flagged it for me. So that's why I went in and tried to send it out. So I'm going to work on that list, that distribution list in terms of the future meetings, and make sure that we have that all set so folks aren't seeing it right before. And I appreciate your ability to be able even to jump on.
Yeah, I was coming out of another meeting and I'll admit I didn't see the new emails coming in. And then when I saw it, I was like, so and I'll admit I've been waiting since like 4:15 to get in. Kept
That was on me
hitting
too.
poor Doug and Eric. Like, let me in.
Yeah, no, that's again, our council staff, gets off at a certain time. So that was on me for not seeing that. But make sure that going forward, we do a better job on that. Maybe if we can get the meeting a little earlier, then the council staff can stay on to help me. So I'll take the heat on that piece.
All right. I won't take it personal. Roberta reached out too. She private messaged me that it was a mix up with the list too. So
yeah. So she told me earlier today that there was a mix up, or she mentioned something, and then I have a full-time job, so I was able to get to it earlier. So I was like, oh, let me try to at least, get that list out to whoever was missing. So we'll
I also have to say that halfway through the meeting, Tim made me hungry with the peanut butter and fluff. So
oh, Tim was is he still on? I thought I saw him.
I thought he was still on. He was doing peanut butter and fluff, and I was like, oh, this is a good day for that.
Well, we got our marching orders for the next week and few weeks. So I really appreciate everybody's time.
Mr. Chair, one quick question.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way that these meetings could be loaded up in social media, like with Facebook or whatever? Because since people may not be able to attend because of their schedules, it will be a valuable resource for them to go and listen at their convenience, and maybe they may even want to share, and maybe who knows, they may be sharing it to people who could actually make things happen faster. Thank you.
Yeah, Focus Springfield records these, so it's recording now, and then they put it up on the Focus Springfield page, City Council page. But to your point, I mean, we definitely could be sharing it, out there like on social media. And I think that's one of the things I asked the folks before for the listening session, particularly, is making sure that we use our networks to spread the information out. So, but no, great suggestion, and I can try to see what that link is once it's already up and running on YouTube. Perfect. Well, with that, I've kept you guys up. Roberta,
can I just say something quickly? Yes, in preparation for the next meeting, if you could ask people to please go through Eric's 17-page document before the meeting, so that if we have questions, comments, whatever, we're prepared ahead of time.
We will get anything new out sooner than we did this time.
Okay.
Yeah, Eric, that document, but also that the orange one that you sent with all the suggestions, I think that one's going to be really big that we need to be up on. so we can
Yep.
continue to move forward.
And I've already begun to work on some sort of matrix so you can look at costs and everything else, so,
Perfect.
yep.
And my other suggestion, I don't know if it's appropriate for the 22nd, but I think you should reach out to our various state representatives who represent the Springfield area, whether they're called representatives or senators, or I saw the council members this time, but I think them as well, because they may be aware of things like the budget conversations, etc., that we could take advantage of. In fact, we might want to have a separate meeting just with our politicos to find out what's going on.
For sure. For sure. I added that to the list for our folks for our distribution.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're right under 5:30, so this was a very productive meeting. Thank you for those who were able to stay on. We will be sending out more information in the coming days. So thank you, Eric, Doug. I know Mike had to jump off, but thank you guys. You got a long list there, but I appreciate you guys getting back to us and really, really hustling towards the finish line here. So
I appreciate it, Counselor.
thank you guys. All right, you guys have a great evening.